Hello everyone, welcome to worship today. My name is Jersey.
And my name is Kendall. Thanks for joining us today. Both Jersey and I are going to be freshmen at the high school and are super involved at Calvary. We love our church.
In fact, this past week, we both volunteered as leaders for Vacation Bible School. The church was packed with over 350 kids and another 200 volunteers. And let me tell you, it was wild.
My family has been attending Calvary since I was in preschool, and something I love about our church is all the opportunities to get involved, like at VBS, where I can grow connections with the kids and help them grow their connections with Christ.
My family has been attending Calvary since I was born, and I love the Wednesday night services at our church with the youth group afterwards because the Wednesday nights just work best with my family's busy schedule with hockey on the weekends, and I get to learn more about God with my friends that I've met at Sunday school.
Calvary's mission is to lead all people to a lifelong faith in Jesus Christ. Here are several ways you can get involved in our mission.
We're getting ramped up for a big fall of kid and student programming. To get signed up, head out to our website, calvaryalec.org, and hit the button that says Kid and Student Programming. We can't wait to welcome your kids and their friends this fall. As always, all kid and student programs are totally free and totally fun. Register today.
In 4 weeks on Labor Day weekend, we hold our last Calvary at the Lake service for the season. The following week, we invite you to join us for our new weekly in-person worship schedule. Beginning the week after Labor Day, on Sunday mornings we will hold 2 services at the church, a traditional service in the sanctuary at 8:30 and a modern service at 10:30 in the worship center. On Wednesdays, beginning September 14th, we will hold a modern service at 6:30 p.m. every Wednesday evening with a tasty pizza meal served prior to the service.
The fall is a great time to get involved at Calvary. We're holding a fall volunteer rally on Monday, August 29th. There are opportunities to lead adult connect groups, serve as an usher or greeter, or on our worship tech teams. Lead groups of kids and students. Help organize service opportunities, share your musical gifts, and more. Join us for our fall volunteer rally on Monday, August 29th. Sign up at our website today.
Once a year, we offer an opportunity for adults to be baptized or to reaffirm the promises of your baptism. This year, we will celebrate adult baptisms on August 21st after worship. If you're interested, head out to calvaryalec.org/baptism or give us a call in the church office.
As we get ready to worship, if you're looking for a little daily inspiration, like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or subscribe to Calvary on YouTube.
Today, Hans is continuing our worship series, Make Waves. Make Waves was our Vacation Bible School theme. We spent the week talking about how Jesus came into this world and made a whole lot of waves.
One of the stories we read was a story about Jesus and a guy named Peter. In the story, Jesus walked confidently across a lake, but when Peter got out of his boat, Peter sunk.
As we worship, whatever you are feeling today, whether you are feeling confident and strong or feeling more like Peter, like you're sinking, here's what we want you to know. At Calvary, everyone's welcome, nobody's perfect, and with Jesus, we believe anything is possible.
Thanks for joining us today. Let's worship.
Hello everybody, Pastor Hans here, and I'm so grateful that you chose to be with us today. I want to start today with a story. When my wife and I were almost married, we flew out to Tacoma, Washington to visit her parents. And while we were out there, something happened to one of our cell phones. Katie's cell phone, the battery died on her cell phone and it wouldn't take a charge. We had both recently gotten new cell phones, and so of course we were torqued. This shouldn't happen. And so we looked up a Verizon cell phone dealer and we made our way to that Verizon shop. And we marched in with cell phone in hand and we shared with them what the problem was, that the battery was dead. And we asked them that great question, what can you do for us? Well, the guy behind the desk, if I'm really honest, he looked like maybe a recent college grad. He had his skinny jeans and his Bieber haircut, and he looked as though he likely was only working there to get a free cell phone out of the deal. Well, the guy got on his computer and he typed away for a few minutes, and then he came back to us and said, "I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. You need to send your phone to the corporate Verizon office." Of course, I was a little miffed, and I said, "I don't think you understand. You see, all that's wrong with the phone is the battery. It's a brand new phone. Just replace the battery for us." And he said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I can't do that." I said, "I'm afraid you don't understand. We're here on vacation. We live in Minnesota. The way we connect with each other is with a phone. It's got all my contacts in it, all my information. All I need is a new battery." And again, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't help you. You'll need to send it to the corporate office." And that's when I leaned in and I said, "Okay, come on. This phone is a brand new phone. There is one of them right there, and I am certain you got a whole bunch of these in the back room with a bunch of batteries on them. How about I just give you this one? You go grab a battery." You know what I'm saying? He said, "Sir, I'm sorry. I can't do that." Well, I looked at my wife, who was beside me, and I looked at her, and she had this look on her face like we had been defeated. This was it. We were not going to get our phones fixed. We were done. She was kind of sailing the white flag. She had surrendered. This was a lost cause. But I got to be honest, for me, I was just getting warmed up. And so I looked at that kid, that punk in his skinny jeans, and I said to him, "Well, thank you. But if you're not going to be able to help us, I want to talk to your manager." Well, I looked at my wife. I was proud. I had stood up for us. And I looked at her, and she had this look of terror on her face. Her eyes were as big as watermelons. She could not believe that I was being that bold. In fact, she was disgusted with me. In fact, she was so disgusted that, get this, she turned around and she walked out of the store, leaving me there by myself to fight for cell phone justice. You see, I'd been far too bold. I had been far too forthright. I had been too loud for her. You see, I had been too risky for my wife. Well, why do I start with this ridiculous story? Well, because I believe with all my heart that we have a God who is inviting people like you and me to take some risks, to be maybe a little more bold than we often are with God's love. Hey, today we are in the second week of a series that we are calling Make Waves. Last week we began this series, and we began with the premise. When you look at the story of Jesus' life, the premise is this: everywhere Jesus went, Jesus was making waves. You follow the story of his life. He went to the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers. He was always challenging the religious and political elite of his day. He gathered a group of disciples, and you would expect them to be the religious types, but they were a bunch of ragtag sinners. As an adult, he went to his hometown church, and guess what? He was run out of the church for the things that he said that day. I mean, the people Jesus spent the most time with, they were the sorts of people that your mother told you not to spend time with. He said the first will be last, and the last will be first. Everywhere Jesus went, he was making waves. And not only that, not only did God create Jesus to come into this world to make a whole lot of waves with God's love, here's what we talked about last week. We talked about how God created not only Jesus to make waves, but God created you and me to make waves as well, which is a little against the grain for some of us when we think about the Christian life. I mean, for many of us, we think that we were raised to believe that the Christian life is all about keeping the peace, right? It's all about sort of flying below the radar. It's all about acquiescing to other people's needs and making sure other people are taken care of. And to some extent, that is true. But the truth of the matter is this: just like Jesus came into this world to make waves, God created you to make waves. And so today, here's what I want to wonder with you about. If we're going to make waves, here's the truth about making waves. Making waves requires risk. It requires us to step out of our comfort zones, to be bold. When Katie and I finally did get married, not only did we need to visit a counselor for that little cell phone incident, but we also thought it would be good for us to get off to a good financial start in our marriage. And so we visited with a financial planner. And that financial planner, he started by asking us, what are your financial goals? And Katie and I said, well, eventually we want to buy a home and we want to have kids and eventually we want to send those kids to college and someday we want to retire and travel. And after he asked us several other questions, he gave us what he called a financial risk assessment. And he pulled out a chart that looked something like this. He said, all of us, we're either a people who are able to tolerate a lot of risk or maybe less risk. There are some of us who are maybe more conservative in how we think of our finances. Our primary goal is to preserve our money. We don't want to risk losing any of it, while others are more aggressive. They are willing to take on risk in order to potentially maximize their returns. And I've always thought this is a great analogy for life in general. I mean, some of us, we are just simply people who appreciate a lower level of risk in our lives. Maybe you are a homebody, right? You'd rather stay at home than go out. Maybe you're somebody who likes to fly below the radar. You're someone who likes just keeping the peace in your life. You're not necessarily the adventurous type. But then there are others of us who maybe we are in love with risk. You have an adventurous spirit. I recently saw a movie about a climber, and his name is Alex Honnold. Now, Alex Honnold is probably the most famous climber out there right now, and it's not because he's simply climbed some of the most dangerous mountains in the world. It's because he's climbed most of the most dangerous mountains in the world without a harness and without ropes. You see, here's the thing about Alex Honnold. He has a whole lot of tolerance for risk. He loves risk. It's interesting. Psychologists suggest that 98% of us rarely, on a daily basis, rarely leave our comfort zone. That leaves just 2% of us that are comfortable with a life that is maybe a little more risky. I love this graph here. This graph talks about the comfort zone that most of us live in, 98% of us. It's that place where we feel safe and we feel in control. But what I love about this graph is as you move outside, there's all this space outside our comfort zone. And what this graph seems to suggest is that as we move past our fears and we move to places of learning and we then move to places of growth, where we live out dreams, where we set big, hairy, audacious goals. I think this speaks to what God wants for people like you and me. You see, God created us to make waves. And here's the truth. Inside your comfort zone, you don't make waves. You never will. And what I'm going to suggest today is maybe if we live our lives always inside our comfort zones, we never experience the life that God fully wants for us, the dreams God has for us, the visions God has for the difference you and I can make in this world. You see, here's the truth. God created us to make waves, but making waves requires risk. In the Bible, there is a guy who's known as probably the great risk taker. His name was Peter. Jesus was with his disciples in a boat, and they came to shore because Jesus, he went up on a mountain and he spent some time in prayer. And when he came back down the mountain, the boat had drifted out to sea with the rest of the disciples in it. And as the disciples were sitting in the boat, they saw this man walking out on the water towards them. And it says they were afraid, they were terrified. But that's when Jesus said, hey guys, don't be afraid, it's me. But then Peter, one of the disciples in the boat, the great risk taker, Peter, he says these words, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. Now, when we have this conversation about risk, here's what I think. I think most of us would say, hey, that's great and all for Peter, but I'm not Peter. I'm not like one of those great biblical characters. I'm not like Peter. I'm not like Paul. I'm not like John. Even Mary, the mother of Jesus, that's just not me. I'm not a risk taker. I'm not a Nelson Mandela. I'm not a Martin Luther King, a Rosa Parks. It's just not me. When I was a kid, many of you maybe know this, I talk about my hometown a lot. I grew up in little old Castleton, North Dakota. Population when I grew up was about 1,000 people. In my graduating class, there were 43 kids, but on graduation day, only 42 of us graduated because my friend Tim failed math class. You see, that's the kind of town I grew up in. There was a cafe, there was a Dairy Queen, there was a bar, and there was a little tiny grocery store. You see, we were such a small town. Some of you know this. Our high school mascot was a squirrel. It was a little town. Well, when I was in high school, I received a great honor. I was selected to attend in Washington, D.C., what was called the Congressional Youth Conference. They selected one kid from the state of North Dakota to represent North Dakota, to travel all the way out to D.C. to spend a week with about 200 kids from across the U.S. Our family didn't have the means to do this, so I had to do fundraising. My dad even drove me out there because we couldn't afford the airfare. And when I got there, it was incredible. We got to meet senators and Congress people and to explore government, to travel all over D.C. And while I was there, what was interesting is there weren't many kids who were from rural places like where I was from. In fact, most of the kids were from big exotic cities like Chicago or New York City or Miami or Los Angeles. And they all, as I got to know them, had these huge aspirations to go to places like Yale and Stanford. And I remember lying in bed there going, what am I doing here? What am I don't belong amongst these people. Now, I wish that was just a kid thing. But fast forward 30 years later, here at Calvary, our church received a great honor. We received a big, huge grant from the Eli Lilly Foundation. There were 93 organizations that received grants that year, and we were one of just 3 churches, and certainly the church from the smallest community. Most of the grants were given to colleges and universities, places like Duke and Harvard. And so whenever I get on the call as a pastor of this church with these huge universities, these presidents and these heads of organizations, I always feel as though, well, what do I have to offer to all of these people as just a pastor from little old North Dakota? You see, we do this. We do this. We say, I'm not Peter. I'm not like those biblical heroes like Paul and Mary. I'm not a Nelson Mandela. I'm not a Rosa Parks. I'm just me from little old nowhere. In the Bible, there's a story in the book of Acts that I want to close with. It's a story about the beginning of the church. If you know anything about the story of Acts, the church began in Jerusalem. And there in Jerusalem, the start of the church, it grew and grew and grew. You could say from the beginning of Acts, the first church, it made a lot of waves. Historians suggest in the first few years of that ancient church, it grew to 100,000 people just like that. And as those ancient Christians got more and more bold and took more risks, well, they began to be persecuted. In the book of Acts, we hear about how a guy named Stephen was persecuted. He was stoned for speaking out. And because they were persecuted, some Christians began to leave Jerusalem for the very first time. And they'd go off into communities, and there they'd attempt to start churches. Well, there's this story about a group of Christians who started a church in a place called Antioch. And it's actually, if we think about the church and the history of the church, it's actually the most important story in the Bible. Because there in Antioch, for the very first time, we hear about how Christians told the story of Jesus to people who weren't Jewish. Back in Jerusalem, all the Christians were formerly Jews. But for the very first time in Antioch, these Christians, they began to tell the story to non-Jewish people. And because they did, guess what? That's why you and I today can consider ourselves Christian. That's why we have the church as it is today, because of the bold nature of those people way back when. Well, here's the ironic thing about what happened in Antioch. We have absolutely no idea who started that church. We have absolutely no names. It wasn't people like Paul or John or Mary, any of the big heroes of the Bible. It was just simply a group of people. The Bible doesn't identify any names. Here's how the story goes. Watch this. Now, those who had been scattered by the persecution that broke out when Stephen was killed traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, spreading the word only among Jews. You see, when there was this persecution, they scattered out, and most of them, they continued to tell the story of Jesus simply to those who were like them, the Jewish people. But it doesn't stop there. Listen to this. It says, say this with me, some of them. Say it again, some of them, however, men from Cyprus and Cyrene, they went to, what's the town? It's Antioch. And they began to speak to, guess who? Greeks also. Non-Jews. They were considered Gentiles. This was the first time this ever happened. Telling them the good news about Jesus. The Lord's hand was with them, and a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord. Now, here's what's ironic about this. We have absolutely no idea who some of them were. Likely, it was just a bunch of everyday, average Joes, like people like you and people like me. But because of this group that the Bible calls some of them, the world was changed forever. Because of them, you and I now consider ourselves Christian, and there is a church for us to go to. And you better believe that this sort of anonymous group of men, they took some risks. In fact, here's what I'm certain of. When they got to Antioch and started talking to people who were not Jews, I'm sure there were text messages, there were emails that went back to Jerusalem, people saying, this isn't how we've always done it. Do you know what these guys are doing? We know this happened because in the coming verses it says this, news of this reached the church in Jerusalem of all they were doing. And because of that, they had to send some religious muckety-mucks to Antioch. They sent Barnabas to Antioch. When he arrived and saw what the grace of God had done, he was glad and encouraged them all to remain true to the Lord with all their hearts. Why did all this happen? Why do we have a church today? Well, it was because of the work of an anonymous group of men that the Bible simply calls some of them. Just everyday people like you and me. So here's my question as we close today. What if God is inviting you to be one of the some of them? What if God is inviting you, everyday, ordinary you, to simply be one of the some of them? You see, what if God is inviting you, like God invited those everyday average, that group of some of them? What if God is inviting you to risk your comfort? Those ancient people, they risked their comfort, their safety. They were being persecuted. If God is inviting you to give up some of your comfort for the safety and comfort of other people. Or what about this? What if God is inviting you to risk upsetting tradition Those ancient people, they told the story to a group of people that they weren't supposed to tell the story to. Maybe in your family, maybe at the office, maybe amongst your friends. God is inviting you to take a risk upsetting tradition. Or how about this? I wonder if God, for some of you, is inviting you to risk your reputation. You see, for those ancient people, they were doing something that had never been done before. That church back in Jerusalem could have looked at them and said, "You are heresy." You see, maybe God is inviting you to risk your reputation for the sake of the people you love the most. Or how about this? Those ancient people, they took a risk for people. They didn't take a risk for their own financial gain. They didn't take a risk so that they could raise their popularity. No, they did it for people. And I wonder, in your life, the people you love, who's looking for you to take a risk for them? Maybe it's your spouse who needs you to have that hard conversation with her. Or maybe it's your kids who need you to take a risk spending less time at the office in order to prioritize them. Or maybe it's the people who love you the most. They need you to take a risk to admit you've got a problem, an addiction, alcoholism, whatever it might be. Or how about this one? Maybe God is inviting you to take a risk for posterity. I love that word, posterity. The passage that we read today, it ends like this. It says, Barnabas went to Tarsus, and when he found Saul, he brought him also to Antioch. For a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. Now get this, listen to this. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. You see, because of what that group of some of them did, for the very first time, it was in Antioch that name Christian was used. Christian simply means Jesus people, Christ people, because their numbers had grown so much and they'd become so influential in their community. The community of Antioch looked at them and gave them a name, and that was Christian. I mean, maybe Jesus is inviting you as well. God's inviting you to take a risk for posterity. Because of what those folks did in Antioch way back when, we are Christians today. I wonder, is God inviting you to do something for posterity, for the future of your kids, your family, their kids, for the sake of your community? Well, maybe, just maybe, God is inviting you to take a risk for posterity. As I close, here's what I know. Some of you are going, this is all great, Pastor. But again, I don't think you heard me. I'm not Peter. I'm not like those great biblical heroes, Paul, John, Mary, King David, King Solomon. I'm no Mother Teresa. And what I want to say to you is that's awesome. That's awesome. Because here's the truth about this God of ours. God used some of them, and you can be one of them.
so much for worshiping with us today. Please pray with us the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Hey everybody, thank you again for joining us for worship today. I'm just so honored and grateful that you spent this time with us. If this is your first time with us, I want to invite you to consider taking a next step. It's an easy next step with us. Just head out to our website, calvaryalec.org, and there you're going to find a button that says sign up for emails. Each and every week on Friday, we send out a note and we share some ways that you can join us on the journey of faith, the ways you can get engaged as together we grow in our faith. Head out to our website, hit that button, and sign up for those emails. Another thing I want to share with you is we are getting ramped up for a really big fall. We got some exciting things coming. We've got especially some really cool kid and student ministries coming your way. If you live in the Alexandria community, we'd love for you to head out to our website and check out those kid and student ministries. We're super excited. Also, coming up real soon, we're going to have a volunteer rally. Maybe you've been wondering, how do I get involved at Calvary? I live in the community, but I'm not quite certain how to take a next step. Well, join us for that fall rally. The information about that rally is on the screen. We'd love for you to get signed up and join us. Hey folks, as we close today, I want to say a big thank you for your generosity. This last week here at the church, this church was packed. Between students, which we had 350 kiddos running around this church, another 60 junior leaders, another 200 adult leaders, this place was packed as we celebrated Vacation Bible School. And all of that is possible because of you. We had 600 people in this building who lived out and heard the story of Jesus' love for them. And we couldn't be more grateful that you chose to partner with us. So as we close, we're going to offer an opportunity for you to make your offerings to support the ministries of this church. You can see all the ways on the screen you can make that gift. The easiest way is to head out to our website, calvaryalec.org. There, hit the button that says Give. You can sign up for a one-time or a reoccurring gift. Another way to give is simply by using that app on your phone, Venmo. Or if you're not quite certain how to give, just drop a check in the mail to the address on the screen. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to call us in the church office. Folks, thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you, and I can't wait for you to join us next week as together we figure out how it is that we make waves with the love of God. Have a great week.